Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. It is winter and the garden is resting for spring. In the meantime, we thought we would answer some gardening questions we got this past year. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Joellen is Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Peter Richards, our local gardener, is here as well. Y'all ready?
We're ready.
This is our long Q&A show.
Very good.
I can't wait. These are great questions sent to us by our gardeners that are out there. So here's our first via email. My African violets constantly get these natty little flying things. I have tried hydrogen peroxide, Epsom salt, soapy water, and I thought I had killed them, but they started flying around again. They are merciless. What would you suggest to get rid of the small flying bugs on my African violets? And this is Lucille on YouTube. So what do you think about that, Joellen? Those natty little flying things, right?
And they are persistent, yes. I understand her dilemma. But they live in the soil, and they like it moist. So when you dry out the soil, they tend to not survive because they're very fragile.
Okay.
You can do that. Also, since they're living in the soil, and if she's had such a chronic problem, she might consider transplanting into new soil her African violet.
Okay.
Other than that, and you can put yellow sticky traps up near it so that it gets the flying ones and they get stuck on the yellow sticky trap. That's about all. I mean, there are some chemicals you can use, but I would just do the drying out and the sticky traps, and possibly, as a last resort, repot it.
Right, and we're talking probably about fungus gnats.
Yes, probably fungus gnats.
Yeah.
That's most likely what they are.
Yeah. Okay, anything you'd like to add to that, Peter?
No, yeah, just make sure that your soil's dry. Feel down in it and don't water it until maybe the top inch is dry. And maybe you could even short it on water for a little while to dry it out. But probably what you're having is you're killing all the ones that are flying, and you have the eggs in the soil and they come back.
Yeah, so the problem here is overwatering.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to be the issue, right? Okay. So thank you for that question, Lucille. We appreciate that. Yeah, just dry it on out. It'll be fine. It'll be good. All right, here's our next via email. My 9-bark shrub got too much water. Can I bring it back to life? And this is Eric from Imlay City, Michigan. So what do you think about that, Peter?
Well, maybe.
Maybe?
Probably not. That's root rot. So what happened is you overwatered. And that might not have been something you intentionally did. It could be that it was planted in a low area. It could be that there's a downspout from your house that just dumps water onto it. It's hard to say. But you can try to see if it's going to bounce back. It might bounce back if there's enough roots left to be able to pull up enough nutrients to support the plant. But it might be easier just to pull it out and plant a new one. If you do plant a new one, I'd suggest that if you're planting it in the same place, to mound up the soil and plant it on top of the mound. Doesn't have to be really high, but 6 inches or so. Plant it on top of the mound. That'll help the water run away from the base of the plant. And then just try and figure out why it got too much water.
Right.
If you're going to replant it, and then stop whatever the problem is.
Sounds good.
Causing the overwatering, yes.
The overwatering. All right. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that question. All right. Here's our next via email. I have skinks in my flower beds. I changed the wood chips to rubberized mulch, and I have not seen as many as before, but they are still a nuisance. How can I get rid of skinks? And this is Evelyn from Hampton, Virginia. So, Joellen,
Yeah.
how do you get rid of skinks?
Well, you got to get rid of their food source, which is bugs. And I have to commend her. She probably was told that, and that's why she went to the rubberized mulch.
Probably.
Because less organic matter, that means that the bugs will go away and not be there as much for the skinks to eat.
Right.
Is she cleaning up everything else? That's the other problem. You got to get all the leaf litter and not have places for them to hide, and just keep everything cleaned up, and so the bugs don't want to be there, and the skinks won't have any place to live. There are nuisance things you can put out, but actually mostly getting rid of their food source and water. If you have standing water sitting around, they like water too.
Right.
Dry up the water, get rid of the bugs, and you'll probably get rid of the skinks.
Right. My mom hates skinks. Yeah, it just scares her to death. But I always tell my mom this: skinks are actually beneficial because they're going to be feeding on snails, slugs, right? Millipedes, spiders,
Yeah.
right? Which most people don't want in their gardens anyway.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But she's doing the right
she's doing
thing
the right
by
thing.
trying to get
Right.
rid of some of the bug population. But if it still bothers her, try to eliminate water and any other cleanup.
Right.
So there's
So
no
any
place.
clutter or anything like that,
clutter.
just get it cleaned up.
Leaf litter, anything.
Okay. Well, there you have it, Evelyn. We appreciate that question. Yeah, don't let those skinks bother you, all right? Here's our next via email. What kind of soil should I put in a raised bed, and how deep does it need to be? And this is Johnny from Mineola, Texas. So what do you think about that, Peter? What kind of soil do you think Johnny needs for that raised bed?
Well, soil-wise, your native soil is probably very good for growing plants. And so you want to have a lot of that in there. If you just put in all compost or all manufactured soil or whatever, you're going to have issues for a raised bed. And so you want to have some native soil in there. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go dig it up out of your yard somewhere else. You can buy native soil. Check local mulch yards or soil places, and you can either go and pick some up, or they can deliver it in a dump truck, depending on what you want to do. But then also you can put in some organic matter, and that will help to just loosen the soil, make the plants really like it, breaks down, gives some nutrients for the plants. Yeah, and and as to how deep it needs to be, well, it all depends on where you're putting this raised bed.
Okay.
So if you're putting it on soil already, then any height doesn't matter. So you could have it, 2 inches tall, because the roots from the plants you plant in it can work their way down into the native soil underneath it. Now, if you have the raised bed, if you're putting it on concrete, on a driveway or something like that, then you do need to have enough soil for the plants to be able to get the nutrients that they need. And so at the absolute bare minimum, 6 inches, but you're going to have problems keeping the soil moist if it's on concrete and it's only 6 inches deep. So you'd probably be better off doing at least a foot. And then, if you're on a surface that the water can't drain off of, you need to make sure that you provide drainage for your raised bed. So don't be building a raised bed out of cinder block and put a piece of plastic inside it, because it'll become a swimming pool and all the plants will die. So a couple things you have to worry about there, but if most people, I think, put their raised beds on the soil, in which case it's not, it's how high is it convenient for you?
Right. That's the route I would take.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would do. Anything you want to add to that?
And the organic matter, I would try to do 20% organic matter to the existing soil. And that's usually a good number to be able to get them organic matter and nutrients to the plants, and loosening up the soil a little bit without, going so organic that it dries out too fast.
Right. Organic matter is always a good thing, y'all. Always. All right. Appreciate that question, Mr. Johnny. Thank you much. Here's our next via email. We have saved a new crepe myrtle that appeared apparently from a dropped seed. It was extremely close to our French tree, so we dug it up, pruned it, and planted it in a large pot. It's blooming now, and we eventually want it in the yard. What is the best time of the year for us to transplant it? And is this a Muskogee crepe myrtle? Okay, and this is Sandra from Panama City Beach, Florida. So what do you think about that? So they saved it, right?
Yeah,
Put
they
it in a
saved
large
it.
pot. They want to keep it in the yard. So the first question is this: the best time of the year to transplant it, though?
It's late fall and winter.
All right. Late fall and winter. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the Muskogee crepe myrtle?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard. I mean, there's a lot of red and pink crepe myrtles, so unless they actually know that there's Muskogee crepe myrtles around, and that is the only possibility that the seed could have germinated from, then most likely it came from that.
Okay.
But other than that, I can't tell.
You want to to tell? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And Peter, any thoughts on the best time to transplant? I know we mentioned fall. But.
Right. Yeah, they're in Panama City Beach, Florida, so it stays pretty warm. It might freeze occasionally there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could, anytime fall and winter is a great time to plant it. Let the crepe myrtle can grow and get established in the soil when it's not really hot. It's easy for the tree to grow there. If I were farther north where you get really hard freezes, I might hold off till spring where, especially if your soil's frozen.
Right.
So that way it's not too stressed by the cold.
Right. That's the point.
And then put it in spring and let it grow then.
Let it grow then. All right. Thank you for that question, Ms. Sandra. Yeah. Good luck to you. Good luck. All right. Here's our next via email. I have noticed ornamental pear trees, Callery pear, around Southern California, especially in the metropolitan Los Angeles, showing signs of spotting and irregular discoloration that leads to death of affected areas. Most trees show about 15 to 20% discoloration symptoms. Is there any way to treat this disease? And this is G. Smith from Los Angeles, California. Yeah, so I think it's interesting that they have a lot of these pears,
Yes.
in the area. And how do you feel about Callery pear?
Well, they are actually banned in certain states because they found out that the seeds that are in the little pears that the birds eat,
Right.
when they pass through their system, they still are viable. But the problem is when they germinate and grow, they revert back to the main species, which is got thorns on it,
Yeah.
and it takes over the native forest. So those have been banned in some parts of the country. So they have their attributes, but there's a lot of parts of the country that they are not welcome in because of their reverting back and taking over native forests.
Yeah. So back to the disease at hand,
yeah.
though. Beautiful pictures, by the way. We appreciate the pictures. Pear leaf rust is what that is. Pear leaf rust. Okay. It's a fungal disease. What that tells me is this: there's some junipers in the area.
Ah, yes.
Right. Because that's the other host plant for the rust disease.
Yeah.
Right. So you either have to get rid of all the junipers, right? Or how about preventative fungicides?
Yeah.
So you probably have to talk to the city, to get their crew out there to do some preventative fungicide spray. Microblutenil is the recommendation, in this area. It's also the recommendation in that area as well. So I would read and follow the label on that. Yeah, get that to the crews and see if they can take care of that for you. And I think that'll work, right? Because it seems like they have a lot of those in
have a
that
lot of
area,
them.
so obviously they want them. So yes, we have to do that.
Yep.
All right, T. Smith, we appreciate that question. Thank you so much for the pictures. Good pictures. All right, here's our next via email. I live in the Northeast and have a lawn with white clover. I like the look of clover when it is green, but not the white flowers. I've heard there is a green clover with no flowers. What is its name and where can I find it? My local nursery cannot help me. And this is Anthony from Hempstead, New York. Well, Anthony, guess what? Peter has our answer for us.
Yes, so there is a microclover, is what it's called. It's called microclover.
Okay.
The Latin name is Trifolium repens or repens.
All right, okay. There you go.
And it actually doesn't grow in a clump like regular clover does. It tends to more spread out. So it works really good for greening up your lawn and kind of being there between the grass.
Okay.
The actual clover leaves are smaller than what you usually think of as clover. And for the most part, it doesn't bloom. I said it also handles mowing very well. For the most part, it doesn't bloom, but there's going to be some blooms on the clover at some point during the year because all plants want to reproduce.
Sure.
But what you can do is you can just mow them. You can just mow it when it's blooming, and that helps to reduce the number of blooms you have. So you won't have, you won't have the big white or pink blooms on clover,
Right.
like we think of for clover. It'll be smaller white blooms, but it will still bloom. And two of the recommended cultivars for it are Pirouette and Pipolinia. So, or it might be Pipolinia. But those are the two recommended cultivars for doing that, but it's really good for filling in, especially if you have thin grass, things like that. Also, since it can handle mowing and it grows a little shorter, it doesn't outcompete your grass.
It's good. That's good information.
stuff.
Appreciate that, Peter. That's real good. And I would like to say this, Anthony, check with your local extension office. They may have some, different cultivars as well, for you to choose from. So, yeah, thank you, Peter. That's good information. All right, thank you for that question, Anthony. We appreciate that. Here's our next via email. This one is very detailed, right? Real good information. In the past few years, I have noticed that the blue hydrangeas in my area have been turning towards pink. I say towards because they seem to be on a spectrum going from blue to purple to pink. And whereas before it used to be a predominance of blue hydrangeas, now it is pink. I know that the color of hydrangeas is primarily controlled by the acidity of the soil. So what do you think is going on? Why are my hydrangeas in my town all turning from blue to pink? Thanks, and this is Grace from Nassau County on the North Shore of Long Island, New York.
Wow.
So very observant.
Very.
Right? Very
Yes.
observant. So, yeah, blue, pink, right? A little purple in the middle.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I think the soil acidity is getting changed, and that's what will happen over time. It just needs to be more acid, so people need to be putting more acidic products into the ground around the hydrangea so they'll turn back blue again.
Right.
Why it's doing that? Because eventually it just does that. The end product of organic matter is a pH of 7, which is neutral.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you keep mulching around it, it's going to end up not being acidic anymore. It's going to tend towards being neutral. Right. So you have to keep adding. For mine, to keep mine blue, I keep adding soil acidifier to my soil, to my hydrangeas, to keep them blue, at least every other year.
Wow.
So I mean, the end product of decomposition is neutral. It's 7, and that's probably what's happening because people have mulched their hydrangeas, and it's getting more basic instead of being acidic anymore.
All right, so it's going up the pH scale.
Yeah,
How about that? Which means that no aluminum is available to the plant.
true.
Right. Wow. Yeah, she's really done her homework with that.
Yes,
Peter,
she
anything
does.
you want to add to that?
No, yeah, just, if you want to, you can get a soil test. I think the hydrangea, though, does a good job of testing the pH of the soil for you.
Yeah.
exactly
So,
right.
Litmus paper.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
exactly right.
So just, just have some soil acidifier, give it, give it some, don't dump it on there.
Yeah.
Because you could easily go way too far the other way and that'll harm the plant.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just give it a little bit at a time and slowly draw it back towards the blue.
All right.
That's right.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Grace. Yeah, we appreciate all the explanation. It's pretty good. All right, thank you much for that question. Here's our next via email. I planted a brown turkey fig tree 5 or 6 years ago, and it has never produced any figs. The area where it is planted is now in partial shade, getting maybe 5 hours of sun per day in the summer. Should I move it to a sunnier location? And this is Pat from Greenville, Tennessee. So what do you think about that, Peter? It hadn't produced anything, right? 5 or 6 years. So yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Sunny location.
Yeah, so full sun is considered 6 or more hours of sun a day. If you're dealing with fruits, which the fig isn't technically a fruit, but it's the same idea. It's a bloom. But if you're dealing with heavily blooming plants or fruiting plants, you need to have as much sun as you possibly can. Because the more sun it has, the more carbohydrates it can make, the more energy it can put into making the fruit or the blooms or whatever you're wanting out of that. So yeah, I'd go ahead and move it. And looking at it, it may be that whatever is next to it has grown bigger and is starting to shade it. So make sure you move it to a place where you're not going to start getting something else creating shade in another 5 years.
Right.
And then just make sure that, make sure it's watered in
Yes,
in the summer. If it gets dry,
Yep.
make sure you water it. That'll help the figs to grow and mature. But yeah, that should be what you need to do.
That should be it. Yeah, at least 6 to 8 hours of full sun. That's what your fig tree is going to need for sure to produce those figs. All right, Ms. Pat, we appreciate that. In Greenville, yeah, at the local extension office there in Greene County, Melody Rose will be able to help you out. Okay. Here's our next via email. We have 2 Chinese pistache trees in our front yard, one on either side of our driveway near the street. We planted them about the same time, about 15 years ago, and both have been good, healthy trees. This spring, the bark started splitting on one of the trees. We decided to wait and see how it did for the season. It leafed out fully, just like the other one. Now, large pieces of bark are falling off. What, if anything, should we do? And this is Larry from Wichita, Kansas.
Yes.
So, what do you think about that?
I
right?
like pistache trees. They're very good trees. And this is the problem that happens when you plant something trying to be even on both sides. Something will happen to one, and then it won't be even anymore.
Right.
But yeah, it looks like, actually from the picture, the tree looks stressed.
Yeah.
Like it's not leafing out like it should. And also, based on the picture, it's near the street.
Yeah.
And during the winter, they get snow there. I'm just wondering if some kind of mechanical damage happened to that tree without them realizing it from either moving snow around or something that caused it to start declining. But because of where it is and because it's a large tree, I would tend to want to remove it, and if you want to plant another one, plant it further back away from the street
Okay.
if you're going to do that. But I think it looks like a mechanical, because there's not a whole lot that bothers pistache trees, but if you get a mechanical injury, then other things can start infecting the tree. And that's what it looks like to me, that it had some kind of physical injury that's now causing it to not do well.
Right. So let me ask you this. What zone?
Oh, that's true. Pistache
think
tree,
that could make a
and
difference.
that could be
make a
part of the problem too, is
difference.
because pistache trees really like zone 7 through 9.
Okay.
And where he is in Kansas is zone 6. So it's a little bit, it will live there, but it's not as happy as it would be further south. So that's the other problem, between some kind of mechanical injury and this it's being not quite in the zone that it prefers is why it might be struggling.
I think so. Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
And everything else would be secondary, like what bores.
Yeah,
and,
boars, everything else is.
All right, Larry, we
Sorry.
appreciate that question. Sorry about that. All right, just keep it as comfortable as possible. Keep it watered, keep it fertilized.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. All right, thank you for that question. Here's our next via email. My chestnuts are wilting and turning yellow. Some limbs have died and dropped leaves. What is going on? I planted these blight-resistant chestnuts 15 years ago, and they produced nuts for about 4 years. This is Hoop Gibson 70 on YouTube. Oh, wow. So chestnuts, right? Cool.
American chestnuts. I know they're trying very hard to get American chestnuts to be revived here back in the United States.
With any success with doing it?
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
The fact that he had it 15 years,
15 years.
And it actually produced for 4 years,
4 years.
That's wonderful. They talk about regeneration in the forest of chestnut trees. They will grow to be 20, 25 feet tall and then succumb to the chestnut blight yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it says blight resistant, it's not blight proof. And so that's the problem here. It probably did catch the blight, and that's probably what's affecting it.
So you think it's the blight?
Yeah, most likely.
Most likely. Okay. Can I throw in something else?
Sure, go ahead.
Wilting. You know what I think when I hear wilting?
Some from vascular
Yeah,
problem.
verticillium wilt. Yeah, which is vascular disease, right?
It could be. Yeah. It could be.
Just wonder. Picture would help, but yeah, when I hear wilting, it's the first thing I think about. It's vascular diseases, and I know verticillium wilt, could be an issue with chestnut.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
But limbs have died and dropped leaves. Yeah, yeah. And wilting and turning yellow. Yeah.
Right.
It could be either one
could
of
be.
those because
It could be.
they're all vascular
Right.
diseases.
And usually with the vascular diseases, I mean, the roots can't transport water to the upper canopy of the tree, to the leaves. So you get wilting of leaves, you get dead branches.
Dead branches. Yeah.
Could be. All right, Hoop Gibson, 70. Did a good job, 15 years.
Oh man, that's good.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't
did a good
discourage
job.
him from
I
trying
would
again
not, no.
and get another one and try again somewhere else, not exactly in that spot, but a little further away,
Right.
and see if you can't get that to grow again, because they're producing resistant varieties all the time and improving on them. So I'm sure from 15 years ago they have a more improved variety now again.
sure,
So I would try
sure.
that.
Sure. But in the meantime, I would prune out those dead limbs, right, as much as possible. Keep it watered, fertilized, just keep it comfortable as possible. All right. And we'll see what happens. All right. So we appreciate that question. Peter, Jordan, this was fun.
It was.
This is
It was
great.
good.
These are some great questions from our
Good
gardeners out there.
questions.
Thank
Yeah.
y'all much. Appreciate it. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to find out more about any of the things we talked about today, go to familyplotgarden.com. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.